Okay, everyone, welcome to the last screencast for Chapter 21. Chapter 21 dealing with the price level and inflation. We talked about how the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, and the price level is calculated. We talked about how inflation is the rate of change of that price level. And then in the second screencast, we talked about what the problems with inflation are, what kind of issues does it cause for the overall macroeconomy. And in this screencast, we're going to briefly talk about what causes inflation? Where does it come from? Well, there's really no debate about where inflation comes from anymore. For a long time, this was a mystery, if you can believe it. And economists argued about, well, where does inflation come from? Well, we no longer have much doubt about where it comes from. Inflation is everywhere and always. Oh, sorry, I got the quote wrong. Milton Friedman. Inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomena. So inflation is caused by expansion in the money supply. If you print more money, if the government issues more and more dollars out into the economy, then the price level will eventually compensate and rise. All right. So inflation is determined by expansion in a nation's money supply. You cannot just turn on the printing press, as a famous politician believed when he was running for office. He believed that you could solve the problem of debt with just printing money. And that's not true. You probably knew that since you were a child and you asked your parents, why don't they just print a lot of money and pay off the national debt? And your parents explained to you, well, that would cause inflation, right? That's exactly what we're talking about here. Printing money, issuing money into the money supply is going to eventually cause the overall price level to rise. Inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. It is caused by inflation. But we have to be careful here. Not all price increases are caused by inflation. Prices change for all sorts of reasons. We did chapters about that with supply and demand, right? An increase in supply will lower the price, ceteris paribus. An increase in demand will raise the price, ceteris paribus. So prices change for a lot of reasons. Consumer goods fall, consumer electronics fall in price because technology improves and those production processes become more efficient. So when the relative price of just one good rises or falls, or all the goods in a particular market rises and falls, that's not inflation. People will often refer to it as inflation. Outside of this class, fine, do what you want. You can call that inflation if only one particular item gets more expensive year over year. Inflation is a change in the overall price level in the economy on a wide range of goods over time. All right. So it's not just when one particular good gets more expensive. Within macroeconomics and finance, anyways, that's what inflation means. Not just that something got more expensive. So how do we think about how the changes in the money supply might cause inflation? Well, again, this isn't an intermediate macroeconomic theory course where you would get into these models in a lot more detail, but we don't need that. We've got a relatively simple equation of exchange here. Then we can use that to see exactly why increases in the money supply causes inflation. So what this says is, let me bring up the abbreviations here. M is the quantity of money, the size of the money supply. And again, if you go into money and banking or you do finance or higher level macro, there's a lot of different ways to measure the money supply. Pick one for the purposes of this illustration. It's just the money supply, the number of dollars rolling around out in the economy, times V, which is the velocity of money. That's how quickly money is spent in the economy. So when I spend money at the store, I buy a sandwich, how quickly is that dollar then spent again on something else? So I pay that for a sandwich over at the Subway, and then that money is taken into the cash register. They put that money in the bank. That money is converted into digital accounting dollars. Those are sent to the corporate. How quickly do they spend that on raw materials, on salary, on bonuses, on whatever they spend the money on? But how quickly do dollars circulate through the economy? That's what the velocity of money is. P is just the price level, which we saw how to calculate in screencast 1. And Y is the GDP for a particular time period. And that is real GDP. So this is GDP with inflation already taken into account. Okay, so how do we use this equation of exchange to think about how changes in the money supply, changes in M, might cause inflation? So let's look at how we can use this growth rate version of the equation of exchange to think about how changes in the money supply affect the price level. All right. So what we're going to do throughout these thought experiments is assume that the velocity of money is constant across the examples. So people are spending dollars at the same rate no matter which of these scenarios I go through. All right. So velocity of money is 0. Percent change in velocity is 0. All right. So if the money supply is changing more quickly than real GDP, so the money supply is growing faster than the economy as a whole. Money supply is going fast. The economy as a whole is going kind of more slowly. That's my best version of that. Well, that means that the price level is going to have to increase. All right, to keep this identity true, to keep it as a true statement, then when M goes up faster than Y, the price level must also go up to keep everything equal. If the price level is going up, if the money supply is increasing at a slower rate than the overall economy, then the price level will fall. All right. So increases in the money supply are less than the increases in GDP. The price level will fall. That's deflation. And if the price level goes up, if the money supply goes up by the same rate as GDP, then the price level will remain constant. So the primary determinant, the one parameter, the one lever that the government can use to deal with inflation is controlling the money supply. And what they roughly try to do is they try to keep the price level, they try to keep inflation increasing at a relatively low rate. The target has been 2 to 3%. In most years, 1% would be okay too, but they try to use the money supply to keep us in that range, right? Because remember, the big bad thing about inflation, the worst thing is when it's unexpected or unpredictable or has a really high variance over time. So the money supply is used to try to keep the price level increases on a relatively steady growth path. All right, so this one was short, but that's the end of our third screencast. All of these screencasts, Chapter 21, dealing with inflation. All right, I'll see you guys next time.